Hello, I'm Bruce Fretz, and I'm here to introduce Michael Weatherly and Glenn Gordon Caron.
What do you want to sing first?
You look terrific.
Is this on? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
See, I lived.
Now you spoiled it for everyone.
Oh, sorry. Well, I mean, for the time being.
Let's start at the beginning. You came to the show straight off of NCIS, right?
Yeah, I think there was a 24-hour period. Yeah.
Is the mic on now? Okay, I think I can hear it now.
Sorry, there was a 24-hour period where I was unemployed.
I was going to project.
But I'll use this.
So, what was it about this character in the show that you thought, okay, this is going to be my next move?
Well, the simplest version of that story is that it was a Saturday, and the president of the network called me at home and said, have you read Bull? And I didn't know what he was, I thought he was talking about the drink. And I said, how you feeling? Everything all right at home? Or, you're calling me on Saturday. So then I called my manager and I said, is there a script called Bull? And so it eventually found its way into my email. And I thought, I'm never doing this. Which is, that's saying, yeah, that happened. It's like what my wife said about marrying me. I'm never. 2 kids later. Why would I marry an actor? I'm a beautiful doctor. So a Bull just presented itself to me. Paul Attanasio, who, Google him, fantastic writer, but his one of the themes that he attacks a lot in his work is it's central to what's interesting to me, which is identity and mask and persona and the way we present ourselves to the world, and then really grappling with who we find ourselves to be over time, and that sometimes changes, but if you ask Matthew Weiner, nobody really changes. So Bull seemed like this fascinating guy who wanted to learn about people and as I turned the pages electronically in my email, I knew I was screwed, because here I was falling in love with this character, and I got to the end of it, and at the end of the original script, the bad guy got away with it. And I thought, well, now I'm really hooked, because that's not a CBS procedural. And we've been catching bad guys for 13 years on NCIS. And so I sat down with Paul Attanasio and Rodrigo Garcia, who directed the pilot, and Rodrigo is, they're both very interesting. And then I talked to the boss, Mr. Spielberg, and you kind of have to do that project. And as we went through the first season, it became a much more arduous task than I had, of course, initially intended or thought of for myself. I was shooting in New York. My family was still in LA. I would fly back every 2 weeks for 24 hours. I was struggling with some of the shoehorned procedural aspects that, is a natural thing when you have to make a network show and fit all the marketing and time slot, and there are certain demands, and it didn't feel natural to me. And I'm just going to sort of move into what happened next, which is
Glenn comes in. Yeah. Well, Glenn, you're known for, shall we say, more eccentric kind of shows, not necessarily straightforward procedurals. Moonlighting, of course, Now and Again, which was a favorite of mine, Medium. So what was your kind of marching orders when you came in terms of where to take the show?
there were no marching orders, to be honest with you. There was a sense that, I think there was a sense at the network and at the studio that while everybody was working very, very hard, there was a better show in there somewhere. No one knew exactly where it was or what it was. And I was the lucky guy. Michael flew out to Los Angeles, and we met for, I think, about 4 hours. And this has happened to me a couple of times in my life, because I think of myself as a writer, I think of myself as a director. You meet an actor and you just go, oh, I get him. I know what to do with him. I had that experience, obviously, with Bruce Willis. I had it with Michael Keaton when we did Clean and Sober. I've had it 4 or 5 times in my life, and Michael and I just immediately, I knew what I thought would be interesting. And then as I studied the rest of the cast, I had a similar feeling, to a different degree, but the same feeling, which is, hey, this would be interesting, that would be interesting, this would be interesting, that would be interesting. So I jumped on board, and it was a little messy. It was somebody else's house, and you're sort of coming in and saying, I'd like to rearrange things. But the main thing was that Michael and I had this really terrific dialogue. I love actors. I'm always surprised when I work with people, producers, directors, who don't like actors. Because to me, it's the best part of the gig. Everybody gets to play pretend together. Anyway, so I came in, and we've been very lucky, knock wood. And the best part of it is, the part that surprises me every time, is that the studio and the network immediately went, oh yeah, we like this. This is good. I mean, so much so that, frankly, Michael and I would have these late night conversations, and they were later for him because he was calling me from New York. I'd be in L.A. We talk about all sorts of
Glenn, are you awake? Listen, it's a great idea. So the way I see it is, what if Bull gets really fat? And he's like, he's just a mess. What if he's drinking too much?
So we were having our late night conversations, and and at one point when Michael came to, he asked me. He said, "Do you have a plan for the end of the season?" And I said, "I have an idea." I said, "But I'm not sure you'll like it, and I'm certain that the network won't like it." And he said, "Well, what's your idea?" And I said, "I was thinking maybe the guy should have a heart attack. I think maybe right on the steps of the courthouse." And he said, "I love that." And I said, "Well, don't fall too deeply in love, because I cannot imagine Les Moonves going, 'Oh yeah, the lead of the show absolutely should have a heart attack. Absolutely, that's a great idea.'"
Let's make him fat.
Yeah.
Can we borrow James Corden's fat suit?
But to my amazement, we pitched it to the network, and they liked it, so we did it. But that's sort of that's been my experience, is that I'm working with wonderful people, and we've sort of really had a nice time.
Yeah. And Michael, before we got to that point, I mean, this show is loosely based on Dr. Phil McGraw's early career.
Another sort of like you'd never have thunk it.
Yeah.
One of those things.
Did you ever consider, trying to imitate Dr. Phil a little bit more? Shaving your head or growing a
Not
mustache?
even for a heartbeat. It was very clear to me on reading it. I was seeing a little Gregory Peck. I was seeing a little Marcello Mastroianni from 8½, a kind of dream weaver, bullshit artist. And I really wanted, Phil was involved in the crafting of it. And what's fascinating for those who don't know is that when Oprah Winfrey got in a huge amount of, she got in some legal trouble and was having to go down to Texas, where a jury of Texans was basically going to find against her in this big cattle lawsuit. And Phil McGraw was an integral part of her defense team, and he came on board as as a trial consultant, what Bull does. And I'd heard about that, but when I was looking at, and again, the O.J. Simpson thing comes up, where that jury becomes such a an important it's an important part of how we try to handle our legal problems. You know, one of the things about selling this show internationally is you learn that there aren't jury trials all around the world. So there's a lot of foreign markets that are, you know, like in South Africa, they're like, there's a jury? I thought there was just the judge. Isn't he the, you know? And I basically came to understand that Phil McGraw started going on to Oprah's show because he really pulled a rabbit out of a hat for her in the kind of miraculous way that Dr. Jason Bull does. And that's where the truth is stranger than fiction, because I don't know how much you know about it, but it's another Google adventure, another rabbit hole.
And how much research did both of you guys do into sort of trial consulting, and how realistic is it? Obviously, you have to have a case of the week, and he gets really involved in the investigating. I mean, does that happen a lot, really, or?
It's completely meticulous. Everything you see absolutely happened.
But wait, you said it's television.
No,
How do you kind of ride that line between realism and drama, though?
We try to incorporate as much of the truth as we can. It might surprise people to know that certainly at the beginning of the season, when there's more time, I spend an hour or so a week with Dr. Phil and actually download what we're doing. And he's sort of Yoda-like in terms of the things that he's able to contribute and the ideas he pushes me toward and the dramatic revelations that I otherwise would never get to. He has thousands of hours in a courtroom, and he's really been invaluable to us.
And I read something on the internet that may not be true, but that Glenn, you had studied with Del Close at Second City at one point.
Yeah, that's true.
So you have a background in improv. I mean, did you want to be an actor initially, or how did this come about?
I acted in college, won a bunch of prizes, and went to Second City. But I always wanted to be a director and a writer, so that's what I do.
And Michael, how did you initially get into acting? I think your first role was on The Cosby Show, if I'm not mistaken, or first TV role.
Yes, that's true. I was Theo's roommate because the actor who played Theo's roommate booked a movie, and my manager represented him, and I was the same size as him. And so she said, Spike's not available, but I have a guy who looks almost exactly like him. Can he act? So I went out and went out to Queens and met Mr. Cosby and the group, and then I found myself on the sound stage, I think half an hour after I shook hands and said hello, wearing clothes that said Spike on the inside. Thank you, Spike, wherever you are. And that was really this truly being thrown into the pool and learning to swim. I kept correcting people. I thought they were telling me that my name was Mark, but they were telling me to stand on my mark, and I was like, "It's Michael. It's Michael. Mark." I'm like, no, it's still Michael. So that notwithstanding, the magic of it was. I just remember realizing what high stakes this is. So this is like 26 years ago, 27 years ago, and the two shows at the time that were vying for the #1 slot were Roseanne and The Cosby Show.
Come a long way.
And I just remember that on Mr. Cosby's door, there was a rubber chicken that was nailed to the door, and it said, and then there were the ratings, and I think Cosby was 2 and Roseanne was 1, and it said, if you don't have something as funny as this chicken to tell us about how we can change this, then don't knock. And there was like a, wow. And I thought, is that a joke? Is he kidding? That was, you had no idea that these people were going to still be in the news 27 years later.
It's true.
In the way that they are.
Yeah. And Glenn, you were in the news before that with Moonlighting, which was kind of a famously turbulent experience, a great show. But how do you kind of look back on that experience now? I mean, you were pretty young, and it was a huge hit out of the box, and quite a ride, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was. I pinched myself a lot, and truthfully, I wasn't present in the sense that the way I dealt with it was I put my head down and all I dealt with was the work. So I was less aware of what a big deal it was until I would sort of step outside, and then it would sort of. I remember going. I went to school in Rochester, New York. And I flew up there for something, I don't remember what, but I remember getting off the plane, and there were reporters waiting, and they wanted to find out if Sybil was pregnant with Bruce Willis's baby or Mark Harmon's baby. And that's when I went, oh, this...
It wasn't Mark Harmon's baby.
I'll tell him you said so. So, you know, but it was an extraordinary experience. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, it was head spinning for all of us. I mean, Bruce is still one of my closest friends, and I mean, we all thought any day now somebody was going to tap us on the shoulder and go, get out of town. So we were just thrilled that people were letting us mess around and do that stuff.
And speaking of Mark Harmon, Michael, you worked with him for a number of years on NCIS. I know you've...
I have a bald patch to
That's
prove
right.
it.
Been smacked on the head by him many times. But you've also talked about how influential he was on you, and stepping into the lead role of your own show. What did you learn from him, you know, as being sort of number one on the call sheet from working with him for years that you've brought now to this new project?
So many things, and it's difficult to crystallize it or distill it in a way because it's still revealing itself all the time. But one of the interesting things is, for instance, we would all be sitting in a little scrum back, you know, on the side of the set getting ready while they were lighting for 10 minutes. And a normal oversharing TMI actor conversation would start. And he would stand up and walk away. And I'd go, and I would think, you know, that Mark Harmon, like if only he would just loosen up and just, you know, why can't he just be with us? We're all actors. And now when I'm backstage with the guys and it starts, I'm like, I'm gonna get over here. And it really, and it's not about not wanting to hear anything, or there's just, there's a funny thing about being the captain, and because I had done it like maybe 5 or 6 times reflexively, just got up when I thought Dad shouldn't be involved in this conversation. And then I realized that's so Harmon. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm becoming my father. Luke. So, not that he's Darth Vader.
No, we didn't mean to imply that at all, of course. So when you guys were coming up, I mean, who were your influences as an actor and as a writer and director? I mean, who kind of did you look up to and want to?
Well, it's fair to say that for me, moonlighting was a very big deal. When I was in boarding school, we would all go into the dorm master's apartment, and all the boys would pile in, and we had 2 shows that we watched: Miami Vice, moonlighting. And it was the kind of thing that there was this quick, loose thing, and when I was in school, Michael King was the head of the art department, and he would show me movies, and I was friends with his son. And we would see things like Double Indemnity and all these things. And then he showed me His Girl Friday. And I said, hey, that's like moonlighting. And then he started showing me all these different fun things. And I was like, who's that guy? And he said, that's Cary Grant. And I said, well, that guy's good. Like that, whoever, out of the mouth of a 16-year-old. And he said, well, he did well. He did well. He did well. And so in that way, I was really drawn, and I became really devoted to going to the, Kim's Video down on Bleecker Street, or when I was in college, going to the library and just finding every film that I could, especially from that kind of screwball era. I really wanted to figure out why those things were working and why they were so funny. And I think that I can hear, Glenn writes very specifically, I'm an ad-libber. I love to ad-lib. I don't ad lib. At least I don't believe I do on any of your words because you've already done it. Like an ad lib is there to sort of make it more of a thing that's you, or it's there to, when an actor feels like maybe it just needs to get filled in or punched up or be more alliterative or musical, and it's all there. You just have to play the notes and trust it, because sometimes it's that Indiana Jones bridge where you're like, am I going to be able to do this? So that's a very long-winded way of saying I'm fascinated to find out who your influences were.
Were you influenced by those old screwball comedies? Was that a big...
I grew up in a forest, and
Rochester.
When I wrote Moonlighting, I wasn't thinking about those screwball. When I wrote the pilot, I wasn't thinking about those screwball comedies. It really only came up as we started to put it on its feet. It became clear to me that it only worked if it went 100 miles an hour. And so His Girl Friday was my way of saying to the actors, let me show you something. I'd read Frank Capra. I was very into Frank Capra, and I'd read his autobiography. And one of the things he said is he said the lens slows everything up by a factor of 2. That one of the best pieces of direction you can offer somebody is faster. And so we showed Bruce and Sybil His Girl Friday. Bruce Willis, by the way, is actually a student of this stuff. He turned me on to Preston Sturges. Yeah. So we were very conscious of that. And I remember saying to the director, a fantastic director named Bob Butler, do it again, do it faster. And he kept looking at me going, Glenn. And we agreed on this one long scene that he would do it. I kept ratcheting it up. And finally we got to the 5th sort of version of it. And he went, no one will ever understand. And that ultimately was the version we used. But my grandfather, when it aired, called me and said, it's so fast. No one knows what's going on. So I think there's a generational thing. It's interesting when you watch, I'll bore you for 2 minutes. If you look at the 60s and you look at Richard Lester's movies, the Beatles movies, the way they compress time, and then you look at the 70s and then you look at the 80s and whatever we did in the 80s with Moonlighting. Moonlighting, I think, I haven't looked at it in a while, but my suspicion is it would look quaint. There is a, you know what I mean? It's just a generational thing. We're able to absorb more, faster. I was watching this with you guys tonight because I'd never seen it with an audience, and I'm an egomaniac. And I was, by the way, very gratified. Thank you for laughing. Anybody I owe money to should see me after. But I was surprised at how much we packed in. I mean, it really, and how little you need to do to sort of get the point across. I think, again, that's a generational thing, that our children and our children's children, their movies will be 90 seconds long.
I think they already are, yeah.
Anyway.
So, Michael, you may have already answered this question with the Cosby Show anecdote, but it's a question we ask everyone here at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. What role got you a SAG card? Do you remember?
It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I was at a place called the Coffee Shop on Union Square, and the bartender was looking at me, and it was a come hither sort of look. Appropriate to the early 90s now, I don't know. But it was clear when she put the drink down and said, it's on me, that the night was that I was not done. So my roommate was like, dude, we're out of here. And I said, yeah, I'm going to stick around here. So I found myself in an apartment on 87th Street and 1st Avenue as the sun was making its way through one of those windows. And I fell asleep, at least knowing sort of where I was. And I woke up, and it was 8:45, and I remembered I had a 9 o'clock audition at Reed Melsky for a commercial. And you can't be late for these things. It's not good to be late, people. So I got on the 456 as fast as I could and shot down Lexington and got in there around 9:30. And they were closing up the audition and moving on to because they go through sections. And there's the young male guys, and then there's the young females, and then they bring in the truck driver guy, and then they bring in the cleaning lady, and everyone's playing a different part in the commercial. So they've finished with the young men. And I come in, I'm like, so sorry. My cat was choking. Whatever it was. It was a cat thing. And so they let me come into the room, and it was a chair like this, and they said, you'll find a cooler to your right. Please slate your name and where agency you're with, and then reach into the cooler and take a bite. So I reached into this cooler, and I said, I'm Michael Weatherly. I'm with whatever agency I was with. And I looked at it, I said, what the hell is this thing? They said, it's a Snickers ice cream bar. Now, my hangover would have killed a small child. I was sweating. I smelled like a gutter shot, like that last sort of shot they pull out of the. I bleary-eyed, FF hair, and I was in trouble. Vomit was a possibility. And the only thing I knew is that I had no time for breakfast or water or coffee or anything. And here was a fucking Snickers ice cream bar. Are you kidding me? So I said, I can eat this. And they said, yes, we'd like you to eat it. And smile. So I unwrapped it, and I put it in my mouth, and I had a mouthgasm that was just like, and I went, oh. This is fantastic. And I saw the one lady go, I think we found our guy. And that is how I got my SAG-AFTRA card. Thank you to that bartender at the coffee shop.
That is quite a story. I don't know if I would recommend that to others, but it worked for you.
No, it's not a way to go about your acting career, people.
But on that note, though, we also ask everyone here...
that and the Meisner technique.
that too, yes, of course. We ask everyone, what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten from another actor, or in your case, I guess, writer and director, that you can pass along to the people here over the years? The best nugget of wisdom that you've gotten from a peer or an elder?
I can say that very simply mine was, I got it from an acting teacher, and then, it's sort of like when your spouse tells you something and then you ignore it, and then your therapist tells you and you're like, yes. And your spouse is sitting right next to you in marriage counseling going, I've been telling you that. So for me, it was stop trying to be what you think people expect or what you think they want to see, and just tell the story that is in front of you your way. And if they don't like it, then they'll hire somebody else, or the director might tell you do it another way. But your first instinct, your first impulse is the only thing you truly have, and the rest is technique and your instrument and everything else. But that spirit that you have inside you, that's your true compass and your guide to everything. And that was given to me by, I can't even, you probably said it to me when we were shooting. But it's like a garden that needs to be constantly pulled free of weeds, but because you get in your own way so much, and that subconscious saboteur just won't let you go. But I struggle and strive to be, as authentic and honest as I can be, and that is a great piece of advice, I think.
Yeah. Glenn, do you have a pearl of wisdom that you've attained over the years you can pass along?
Well, I do, but it's one of those things I don't follow. I think about...
I'm on that diet.
David Lean, who I did a series with, said really the only 4 pieces of direction that matter are faster, slower, softer, louder. And at first, I didn't understand it. For years, I didn't understand it, because I love actors, I love directing, I love the work, I love getting in there. I feel like it's my job to be an audience, and I'll watch somebody work, and then I try and contribute something. I'll whisper something in their ear and try and get them closer to the end of the diving board and all that stuff. That's my inclination. And then there are times I hear him say that to me, and I realize, just shut up back up and let these people conjure, you know? And those are the two sort of instincts that I war against. But I know it's actually a very, 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 very smart piece of advice.
Yeah. We have time for a few questions from the audience. The first question is from Consuelo, from Michael. Thank you for the weekly joy and de-stressor, first of all. Second of all, what has the transition of going from working with a group at NCIS to a totally new cast been like? How difficult is it to develop new chemistry with a new team? And you rock.
You know, 13 years in one setting with, you know, there were a few changes over time, but there was a really remarkable thing that happened around season 3 on NCIS, and it went on for years, strangely. We loved blocking. We would come in the morning, and it was, we just cracked each other up, and I'm sure we bugged, you know, Mark Harmon to death. That's part of my thing, is that I got to be the irreverent, cheeky, overgrown adolescent. That's a great part to play. You can see, if you watch The Magnificent Seven, how much fun Steve McQueen's having making fun of Yul Brynner. And I'm sure that if McQueen were here, he would tell you that's one of his favorite experiences, because the pressure is on. You're a performer, and you've got stuff to do, and it's you know, they're giving you $100 million a year to make a television show, and it's big business, and it's the stakes are real. You're not allowed to be sick. You're not allowed to miss work. You're really not supposed to be late unless it's a Snickers commercial. And so I had a real peak experience in that group, being part of that group. Obviously, the difference now, as I said earlier, is that I have this parallax view. See what I did there? A little Pakula. Or is it Pakula?
Pakula, yeah.
You know, it's Scott Bakula, Alan Pakula. Right, exactly. Okay, good. We
Did
got
a
it.
series with both of them.
We're all right. They must be from the same country. So I love the team that I'm with now, but I have to say I don't feel as much a part of a team, because it's necessary that I stand a little bit outside it. Having said that, what an incredibly talented group of people this is. I mean, Chris Jackson and Geneva Carr and everybody. It is aces, right?
But you also have to. NCIS was truly an ensemble show. I don't think Bull is. I know that sounds slightly crazy. I think I mean, the name of the show isn't Tack. It's Bull. It's very much about the guy and the people in his orbit, but he's really the center of the universe. He's really what we write about. We explore them all, but we most deeply explore him. It's in his shoes that we spend most of our time. If you think of it as a first-person narrative, he's the first person. And I think that's different, and that may explain some of what you're trying to articulate.
Well, it's a terrific character, great performance, and a really fun show. And we want to thank Michael Weatherly and Glenn Gordon Caron for joining us.
And thank you guys for coming and watching.
Yes, thank you.